Am I the jerk for pressing charges on a former friend for shaving my head? For context, a relative of what used to be a close friend of mine, whom we'll call Gary for this story, contracted cancer. I, mid-20s male, was sympathetic and even contributed $100 to a donation pool for their treatment. But Gary came to me one day and took his hat off to reveal a freshly shaven head. He told me that everyone in his family was doing this in support of his relative, and so were a lot of our mutual friends. Then he asked that I get on the bandwagon. I told him I didn't want to shave my head because I like my hair. My hair is black, regularly combed, and well styled. He said I could just get a wig or something, and had actually brought his shaver kit. He was unboxing it when I told him that this was not happening. I don't even really know his relative that he's doing this for, so I'm not doing it. End of discussion. He called me a jerk and left angry. We didn't speak for a week. Then last Saturday, I got invited to a party at another close friend's house. There, I found out that Gary had tried the same thing on several other friends, and only a couple of them actually did shave their heads. Gary wasn't at the party, so I had a blast hanging out, playing video games and listening to rock music. But I had way too much to drink and couldn't drive home, so they said I could just sleep upstairs. I passed out on a bed, and it was a blissful sleep till I was shaken awake by another friend who told me Gary had showed up late and they caught him shaving my head while I was passed out. I saw what I looked like in a mirror and wanted to scream like I was in a horror movie. Gary even shaved one of my eyebrows. Gary was still there and acting proud of himself, saying, "Now you're gonna have to shave off the rest, just like me." I was furious and called the cops. When they got there, Gary fully admitted to what he had done to me and even said he was justified. The police didn't seem to think so, as this is classified as a form of assault. They asked me if I wanted to press charges, and I said yes. Gary lost it on me while they took him away in cuffs. I tried getting my hair restyled into something presentable, but there was no saving it, and now I'm bald too. Now a bunch of Gary's family are telling me to drop the charges because Gary was off his meds and didn't mean to do it. I was like, what? Because I never knew he was on meds. But I still refuse to drop the charges. It'll take months to grow my hair back the way it was. But all of the calls and messages from Gary's relatives are starting to get to me. Just about everyone else in our friend group has gut Gary out though, and say that I'm doing the right thing by not dropping the charges. So now I'm divided. Am I the jerk for pressing charges on a former friend for shaving my head in my sleep? Edit. I want to make something clear here. So many people have said things like, "Dude, it's just hair." But would they all be saying that if I wasn't a man? What if I was a girl that had her hair that took years to grow? Would they be saying the same thing? Sure, hair grows back, but it takes time. If it was something that grew back fast, people would be less inclined to care. But it's not fast. It takes months. And for someone who had long hair, years. That's a lot of time wasted growing. And I don't plan on pushing for Gary to go to prison, but I don't plan to drop the charges either. His family already bailed him out, and while I didn't know he was on meds, I knew he had quite the temper and even an entitled attitude at times. One example being a lunch where he wanted us all to combine the check and split it evenly. He got the most expensive thing on the menu. I got a cheeseburger. When we all said no, Gary went off on us for not being good friends. He's always been a jerk when he doesn't get his way, and I've only known him for like 3 years. This incident was the last straw, not just for me, but for a lot of other mutual friends. As for the charges, I don't want Gary to go to prison, but I would like him to get some therapy and community service. With the way Gary has acted around me in the past and what he did to me, I actually wonder how long before he got more violent. I've seen and heard of him getting in fights for less. No one can fire my boss, so she does it herself. This isn't my story, but I was able to witness it all in its glory because I used to work for one of the people involved. Years ago, I used to work at a state government agency where my boss was a political appointee. Her mom was a big wig in our governor's party who wrangled a political appointment for her daughter, which meant she had some clout behind her. Let's call her Shannon. Shannon was not good at her job at all. She was frequently out of the office for meetings, 2-hour lunches, coffee with friends, a bit of shopping. She was also a bully and a tyrant. She bullied her staff and would hold the threat of firing over everyone's heads to get them to do what she wanted. She wasn't a micromanager because she was never around enough to actually micromanage anything. And she was widely disliked throughout the entire building. This was a large agency, so to have a building where almost everyone disliked you took a lot of work. The problem is that, as a political appointee, she was untouchable. The people who had the power to fire her couldn't because of her family. Even the number 3 person in the agency couldn't do it, and he was a political appointee as well. But after a year of mystery meetings and time out of the office, her excuses were catching up to her. The agency director removed her from her job and put her in charge of special projects. Anyone who's worked in a corporate job knows that people get put in charge of special projects because they were largely incapable of doing their previous jobs. They didn't get fired, but they no longer had any power. This was Shannon's case. For a while, she seemed to get the message. She shaped up, didn't have any more mystery meetings, didn't disappear from the building for 2 hours, and treated people somewhat nicely. Of course, it didn't last, and Shannon returned to her old ways. Around that time, we got a new assistant director. We'll call her Trisha, who was also a political appointee. She was the number 2 person in the whole agency, and she was great to work for. She was very serious about her job. She had access to Shannon's electronic calendar and saw what Shannon had been up to. She then cross-checked the security logs to see when Shannon was in and out of the building. After her brief investigation, Trisha emailed Shannon with a list of dates and said, "Can you tell me more about these different meetings you were having and why they took you so long?" I'm paraphrasing. Well, Shannon wasn't having any of that. How dare Trisha call her character into question? This was an outrage. It was so outrageous, in fact, that Shannon wrote a resignation letter and slammed it down on Trisha's desk. That'll show her. After a few hours, Shannon had time to think about what she had done. She remembered that she had a 1-year-old at home. She also remembered that her husband was an unskilled truck driver who made $8 an hour. Edit. He was a local delivery driver for a construction firm, not a CDL driver. And she remembered that she was the primary breadwinner for her family. She went back, hat in hand, and apologized for her attitude. She said she was willing to try harder, and then asked Trisha if she could please possibly have her letter back. Pretty please? Trisha said, "Oh, I'm sorry, you're too late. I already processed the letter and sent it off to HR. I'm afraid I can't undo that." Do you remember in the movie The Incredibles, when Mr. Incredible fought the giant ball with legs? The ball was so indestructible and powerful, the only thing that could beat it was itself? This was that moment. The previously untouchable political appointee had just been fired by the only political appointee who had that power, herself. And rather than protect her or do her a solid, Trisha would not undo her self-termination. She just let Shannon be her own undoing. When news of Shannon's self-firing raced through the building, you could hear the cries of, "What? Are you serious?" followed by howls of laughter as each new person heard the story. Shannon was out, and everyone who had to deal with her was much happier than they had ever been in that job. Am I the jerk for not wanting to co-own a house with my husband? Here's the background. I'm female 30, and my husband is male 35. He comes from a wealthy family, and he works for the family business. When we met 7.5 years ago, I was a fresh college graduate working a minimum wage job and neck deep in student loans. We got married very fast, 8 months after meeting, and I had met his parents, all of 3 times. His parents insisted that I sign a prenup, and I understand them completely. If my kid was in the same situation, I would have made the same decision. This prenup pretty much says that in the event of a divorce, I get nothing. Unless he cheats, then I get alimony. Also, finances, debts, properties, and savings are completely separate unless both our names are on the asset. I asked to amend it so that he gets nothing too, and they all agreed that it was fair. The house we live in is owned by his parents, and the car he drives is a company car. We have a joint account for monthly expenses, groceries, utilities, landscaping, etc., that we put in equal amounts. Over the last 7 years, I've been able to get a good job, pay off all my loans. Not having to pay for housing is a huge bonus, and I saved about 35% for a down payment on a house and a substantial emergency fund. On the other hand, I know that my husband has credit card debts since he is of the mindset, buy it now and pay it off later. He has no asset to his name except for a 401k, no savings at all. Even though my in-laws are great and they consider this house as ours and not theirs, I want something to my name. I want to have a house that is my own to change how I want and to be proud of. Over the years, my husband won't even contemplate the idea of buying a house. I started looking and finally found the house of my dreams, and suddenly my husband did a 180 and wants to co-own the house with me. His idea is that I put the down payment, pay another 15%, and he pays for the other 50%. That way we are equal owners. I do not want to do that. I know my husband, and he will not be able to pay his part of the mortgage. Sometimes his share of the monthly expenses is transferred by his parents, as well as them always paying off some of his debts. Now he won't even talk to me, says if I don't agree to co-owning with him, then he won't move in with me at all, that it shows that I don't trust him. So what are your advices on this whole mess?